Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
Do you have an electric car? Are you planning on getting one? You do know the world's going to end if you don't get one, right?
So, when are you buying your first electric car? Anytime soon?
I can't find a way to make it make sense for me yet.
How about the kids? They getting ready to buy their first electric car anytime soon?
No intention whatsoever.
None.
We've got no electric in our family.
You got any electric cars on your street that come to mind? Popping out somewhere?
No, I have one friend who got a Tesla, and he is very enthusiastic. He very much loves it. Other than that, I don't think I even know anyone else with an electric car.
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends who are like big tech people, and they just love to get the newest stuff, and they've got Teslas. I don't know anybody else. Oh, I've got a neighbor down the street from the Florida office that's got an electric car. I think he's got the Volt.
Wow, that would have been like my last choice. I was going to say, if I did do one, I would probably trust the Prius the most, not to give Toyota a little shout out.
So
the Volt, I think, is usually considered one of the worst.
In any case, there we go. So Wall Street Journal did an article a couple of weeks ago that we passed around. We talked about it. We talked about it in Public Square. We talked about it on 1850. We talked about it on Your Morning Show, which is actually Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. And it seemed to be crystal clear from the analysis of this journal article, which was pretty extensive, that the big three are walking away from electric vehicles. And the answer is quite simple. People don't want them.
Wasn't it Hearst first? The rental car company was the first to walk away from 20.
That's what started it. That's what triggered
it. Really did. I mean, I wonder. So they looked at it and they said, the amount of accidents, the amount of maintenance, it just doesn't make sense. They sold off a fleet of 20,000 of them to show you how little demand and how much little it made sense. And then the big three.
It was just like dominoes falling. The whole thing down, and they lost millions. They lost tens of millions of dollars last year trying to do this, trying to make the environmentalists happy, trying to do the whole thing for everybody. And at the end of the day, you remember you've used the old dog food joke, right? About all the marketing guys in the boardroom and everyone's making their presentations about how good it was, and the CEO gets up and says, I don't understand it. These are the best presentations I've ever heard. And why are we losing money on this dog food? And one guy does kind of a Tom Hanks at the end, raises his hand and says, sir, there's just one answer. And the dogs don't like it.
They don't want to eat it.
They just don't like it. People have seen with weather, with so many, with batteries blowing up, with the cost of replacement batteries, it's a really stupid idea.
I've always said that from the very beginning, same thing with solar panels. We don't stay in our houses long enough for them ever to break even, let alone begin to pay for themselves. With automobiles, we're even worse in America. We don't keep them that long. So, you're going to pay extra for the same car, but you're not going to keep it long enough to get the benefit of that versus the savings of gas. Plus, it's electric. Plus, it's not any different carbon footprint. But yeah, the dog food example, I think, David, is the brilliant cut to the chase. At the end of the day, nobody really prefers it. Nobody really wants it. I don't know why BMW and Mercedes are really going to be left holding an expensive bag, because they went all in with it. And when they come out of it, they're going to lose a lot of money. There was just no demand. It was forced. And that's why I used to say, oh, my gosh, this is becoming Joe Biden's Solyndra, which brings us to this article from China. Because that's what it didn't make sense with solar panels. We don't keep our homes long enough. And oh, by the way, if you want to get into the solar competitive business, it's already owned by China and you can't compete. And so if the technology of electric vehicles was never in demand and it was pumped up by a narrative of global warming or pumped up by corporate support of a narrative, but no consumer demand, now, guess what? Even if anybody wants to, now this was always the case of me, because it wouldn't have been China, it would have been Japan, but I would have gone Toyota Prius. They've been doing it the best. It's priced the most affordable. It makes the most financial sense if you're going to do it. But yeah, here comes the 1-2 punch to literally make this a Solyndra, almost.
So then out of nowhere, here comes this article from the New York Times. And it's a 7-minute read. It's this giant article, and it happened very quickly, so fast that you might not have noticed. Over the past few months, America's big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis.
Which, by the way, were you familiar with Stellantis as the corporate umbrella name for Chrysler
Honestly,
Jeep?
Going back to Lee Iacocca, Dodge Chrysler Jeep has had so many owners, so many companies have owned them, and so many. Who knows what the name of the thing is now?
Yeah.
What a surprise. All right, Mercedes actually owned them for a while.
I didn't know that.
It's General Motors and Stellantis, the oddly named company that owns Dodge, Chrysler, and Jeep, landed in big trouble. Okay. So tell me if I got the premise of this article right. Basically, what this writer is telling us is that now is the time the federal government has to bail out the auto industry again.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the federal government doesn't bail out the auto industry right now and lay a financial basis by which the transition can be made for them to get rid of all their gas vehicles and move completely to electric, first off, the climate will collapse and the world will end. But even more imminently and significantly, that the big three automakers are about to be wiped out by cheap Chinese electric cars that are coming. And they're going to flood the market because the Chinese have figured out how to build an electric car that they can sell in the U.S. for $11,000. Am I close?
Well, there's two things. Yeah, you nailed it. By the way, it brags for a section about despite union walkouts and so on and so forth, the big three, showed really good profits. So out of one side, they're doing real well. But of course, anybody can dissect this. Yeah,
They
they're
made
doing
billions last year.
Yeah, they're doing real well, but electric's killing them.
They lost billions on electric.
Exactly.
You know the fastest way to stop making billions? Lose more billions.
Lose more billions. But that's the point. And so now it is literally now Solyndra was financed on the front end. This front end. This was narrativized on the front end and will be tax supported and funded on the back end with a bailout. But actually, it's funny, this is where iron sharpens iron. What I caught on was, well, first of all, what I already stated, I didn't even know that there's such a thing as Stellantis that's over and above Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, nor do I care. We do have one Jeep in the family that belongs to Nick.
And we do too.
Yeah, Jeep's a great vehicle.
Our Jeep is so old that Mercedes built it for Dodge.
Oh, really?
Or for Jeep, yeah. That's how old it is. I'm old in color.
I don't know that I would own a Chrysler. I know I wouldn't own a Chrysler. I don't know that I would own a Dodge, but I would own a Jeep.
Jeep is so old that it barely has a computer in it.
Oh, that's a real old one. Where is it? I've never seen it.
No, it's in the Cleveland office.
Oh, okay.
So why would you keep a Jeep that's so old that it barely has a computer in it and it was made by Mercedes for Jeep?
Because it's still running great.
Because when you have the next giant attack on some electronic EMP, whatever goes on, maybe I got a car that'll still run.
It's halftime here at 1850 Main Street. Time to freshen up that cup of coffee. You can start every morning off right by listening to Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. Tune in to stations across America and online at the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day, every day, with Your Morning Show on the iHeart Network.
All right, I won't out anybody, but there's somebody that's a general manager of a major dealership. All right, so this guy's very high up. And we were having a conversation, and somebody brought up, they had a Tesla for sale that was a great buy. And I looked at him, I said, because Alex kind of liked it. I said, would you get this? And he goes, no. I like knowing I have gas in the garage, and if I ever need it, I can go anywhere. And I thought to myself, and that's the general manager. But no, the part that took me was Andrew and I were looking for a vehicle, and we drove everything and tested everything. And you and I have a similar, I don't know if you're comfortable talking about what you own, but we are friends with Darrell Waltrip, who has a car dealership, plus the Honda's a great product. And we had for the longest time a Honda Pilot. And then they kind of changed it, and we didn't like the new ones as much. So we started driving everything. And then there was one that stood out. And when I tell you, stood out over and above Honda, stood out over and above Mercedes, stood out over and above BMW, stood out over and above everything. And we went and drove the Kia Telluride and couldn't believe the quality, the ride, the technology. I mean, it was just, I looked at Andrea and I said, this is the most perfect vehicle we've ever owned. Now, I have a sedan that I drive that I love. I have like a personal attachment to it. But even I got to look at you and go, this is a better vehicle. And I thought to myself, something's up. How did South Korea get so much better than the Japanese automakers? I mean, something's up. And then this is more about the technology and the ability to do it cheap with China. We can't even speak to the quality of this. But I just wonder if there's some movement within the auto manufacturing business that's about to have a game changer. Because I just saw Kia, who was originally the cheap thing to buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now Kia is really the best of the best out there.
Well, we're going to have an argument about that. But
yeah, but you would probably go Honda.
You're happy with what you got.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is, there's some stuff coming, and none of them are stuff we're making. That's my point.
Yeah, but this is and the big three. Okay, we listen. There's a certain.
I took a little too long to land there. I didn't mean to sell you a key. I was trying to say
that's all right. I'm not sold.
In all of the conversations that we're having, none of them are not USA.
I'm staying right where I am. But here's the question that I've got. We can go back. I've got a full disclosure. I'm still bitter about the last car bailout. I'm still bitter about cash for clunkers. Mm-hmm. I'm still bitter about the car dealerships that got bailed out and the ones that didn't get bailed out. We have friends that own dealerships in multiple states, different friends from different places around the country, whose businesses were taken off the books, wiped off the map. Generational car dealerships destroyed because the Obama administration sat back there with their car czars and their little committee and picked the winners and picked the losers. And this article in the New York Times is basically resurrecting that entire structure, now saying, oh, the sky is falling. The world is coming to an end. Here come the Chinese tidal wave vehicles. They're going to come in and sweep over everything and wipe out the big three. Wait a second. Wait a minute. The presumption in all of this is that we're all so stupid that we'll buy a piece of Chinese junk for $11,000. That'll be pretty much like probably riding in a wind-up roller skate. That the battery, how do you possibly say, unless, of course, we're going to back the slave labor behind the industry that's going to get them to that $11,000 vehicle.
As you're saying this, just to show you how differently we're wired, I'm thinking of this Gen Z generation that has been so indoctrinated. I mean, many of them really believe we're all going to die, and they don't like to work anymore. They don't have a high work ethic. No, I can think of an entire generation in America that would fall for this cheap China product.
So while China is enslaving people to dig the elements out of the ground with their bare hands and teaspoons to build the batteries, and then they're going to enslave their people into fractional wages, while China is still the world's greatest problem in regards to pollution in the world. They're the biggest carbon offender in the world. These Gen Zers are going to buy an $11,000 roller skate with a battery in it and feel like they saved the world?
Yeah, absolutely they will.
Wow. Well, I guess you can't fix stupid.
No. Or dog food, apparently. No, I actually believe that. I actually think it'll play with the younger generation. I do. It won't play with anybody. It certainly won't play with boomers and won't play with, I don't even think, anybody 35 up. But this young generation, there might be a market for that.
But here's what the New York Times is basically saying. We can't even get to that place unless the federal government right now
proactively acts now.
Goes back to that Inflation and Reduction Act. Oh, that thing. Remember that Inflation Reduction Act, that bill that created all these billions of dollars, along with the Infrastructure Act and the Green New Deal and blah, 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 all these different pieces and parts that somehow sit on John Podesta's desk in the White House as he authorizes where the checks are going to go. So this is a direct calling John Podesta, calling Mr. Podesta, please pick up on line 3, okay, and start to write more checks, John, because what we need to do is have Congress give you a boatload more money. Here's the article says, you may have heard about the Inflation Reduction Act's generous subsidies for domestic electric car production. Can it help here? It can, and it will, but the act alone is not nearly big enough to insulate these companies from the threat posed by the Chinese EVs. Okay, so the purpose of the American taxpayer is to insulate the big three against international threats of other business models.
Before, during, and after the failure.
And like the big three give a rat's rear end about the American taxpayers to start with.
No.
They're international global corporations who care about one thing, and that's the bottom line and their golden parachutes. It's been a long time since I bought something from the big three because I remember what happened in the Obama administration.
And I love this paragraph. He has reason. In other words, help the big three before you get to the harsh electrical realities. The legacy of the auto industry employs more people in Michigan than any other state. Although that hasn't even been the storyline of this primary election season.
Oh, and this article came out the day of the Michigan primary for the presidential election. What a coincidence. The New York Times did that, huh?
Yeah.
And reminded people how few votes Donald Trump won by in 2016 in Michigan. Oh, I get it. So it's going now. Okay. I know that they wouldn't think about using public policy to buy votes in Michigan. Okay. I can't even do that much sarcasm legitimately.
No, you can't.
It's pathetic. This is pathetic. And all of
David, this is how you get $34 trillion in debt.
And this is how you continue the global warming hoax, which is above and beyond everything else about a massive wealth transfer.
So how many times did you hear Barack Obama? The rising seas. He would do all his big speech. I went off on I know you.
Yeah, you got to tell the story again. I can't get enough of the glacier. Was this a
right,
book you read or
no? Listen, David is an intellect. All right, I am a curious person. There's a difference between us.
We're somehow like Abbott and Costello. I don't understand.
Well, yeah, because like you walk around the Mission Center, and I actually have a George Washington original and this. I mean, you're reading founding documents and books and history and taking doctorate classes.
Yeah, but I also worked on the shop floor, okay, and swept floors and worked in manufacturing.
I'm not building you up to cut you down. And I just walk around curious. I'm just like my son, Nick, I'm always asking why or looking. So, you're getting up, you're hosting a morning show and everything's about Michigan, which is a fascinating story, which we're going to break down in Friday's edition because we really got to get into some of the nuance. But this was a hit job, Michigan. This is the far left within the Democrat Party making a move on their party simultaneously while the Associated Press struggles, or was it the Washington Post that struggled to say Muslim or Islamist.
That was the AP. Oh, man, don't get me started on that story. I almost broke my neck on the radio this morning.
What they're trying to say is there's 300,000 Muslims that are trying to get the president to change his foreign policy right now, not take the next step to a nomination.
Right.
And change it right now.
But they couldn't even say the word Islam or Muslim.
No, it was laughable. But there's all this stuff going on. And I looked down and there's this study of the largest glacier. And I was like, I didn't know we had like one glacier that's been here in the Antarctic since the beginning of time. And that basically all of these narratives, the more you read, the more interesting it got. But all these narratives about it's going to melt and the seas are going to rise. This is the one. This is the rock we're all watching. And we've only been able to measure it since 1970, all right? In light of the thousands and thousands of years. What kind of information you think you got in a 50-year glimpse? But they know it's melting. And they know, by the way, if Al Gore was right, we'd all be underwater and dead by now. So clearly they should have less and less credibility, but they don't. And so, but when I was studying it, we are finding with new technology ways to study layers and kind of get, as science can only do with its best guess, its life over the thousands of years. And so what they really trace it to, and this is the premise of the whole story, there was an El Nino or a weather pattern that seemed to impact this large glacier. And once these glaciers are wounded, follow this, they never heal. Okay, so if it was wounded 55 years ago and it's traceable, any change, how does that translate to we're all going to die soon unless we buy an electric car? But it was so fat. David, the more I read it, the more I thought I may do all 3 hours on this. And of course, I probably would have.
Is this an article?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Will you please send it to me? Is this like Frosty the Glacier? Is this?
But I don't know if it's
Frosty's
just...
did Frosty get triage when it was so wounded? I mean, this is terrible. Where does Frosty go to get help?
Do you think a contractor comes home and watch Home and Garden television? Do you think a doctor comes home and watches surgeries on television? Or do you think a pilot comes home and watches all the pilot videos I watch? No, they do it, but they're sick of it. But for me, it was the most fascinating thing this morning as I was reading it. And I'm like, if we were in a room and I said, David, you got to pull this off. I'm going to give you this unscientific loose thread. Go convince an entire nation to destroy itself over the loose thread that this chink in a glacier could cause our death and demise.
Save Frosty. I feel the T-shirts right now. I feel them happening right now. Save Frosty. This is life and death. And because if we don't save Frosty, we'll lose all the snow cones in the world.
But that's why I come back to the Cylindra. The Cylindra didn't make sense. The consumers didn't want it. It wasn't affordable to the consumers. I would have to shell out all that money, live in this house for about 15 years. I think with electric cars, you really got to drive them 7 years before you start breaking even because of the higher cost until China arrives.
And then you got to have the battery replaced.
Yeah, then the battery. Well, but you or just get a new one. The problem, we don't drive cars 7 years. So it never.
But see, here's the thing: what's the car going to be worth in the market if it needs a new battery replaced? And the battery's minimum $5,000. It might be as much as $15,000. Look, there is no go in this business. Not yet. Now, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now. I'm not suggesting that there's no possible way.
And when it happens, if it happens authentically, it'll be successful. But when it's forced by a government based on a narrative, that's a different story. But to my point that I said, because my takeaway from this article was not so much, I sent it to you and said, here comes, when I was saying cylinder, I didn't mean literally, but apparently literally, here comes another bailout. That they're going to start begging for the auto industry. So they force us into electric fails, and now we got to pay for it. But I was intrigued by the China part because I could see this young generation that has been so carefully and meticulously, persistently and consistently indoctrinated, and they don't have the greatest work ethic. I could see them biting. I could see them going out and buying these Chinese $11,000 electric cars. I could see it. And then I just come back to full circle. Oh my gosh. This is Cylindra all over again, and we're going to pay for it. I mean, you can't make, how many things are we going to have to live over and over and over again?
This episode of 1850 brought to you by the Save Frosty Society and the U.S. Snow Cone Association.
Listen, glaciers are no laughing matter, young man, and you'll take it seriously after you read the article. That big boy means everything to us. Caesar go ride!
Did you know that you can hear Michael and David every day on your morning show on the iHeartRadio network? You can tune in daily or log on live to the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day on your morning show. Then join us here where the conversation continues. Subscribe today so you don't miss a minute and visit 1850mainstreet.com to find out more. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.